All right, good morning, YouTube. In today's video, we're going to be going over a subscriber program review. If you would like to submit your own program for review, either copy and paste it into the comments below, or you can send me an email, and the email is on my channel. If you like this content, if you would like to support the channel, I recommend you like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to work with me as a coach for muscle building and strength training, then that is available on my website as well as merch. So if you'd like to support the channel and support me, I would highly appreciate it. But anyway, let's get into this video. So this program comes from Milo or Milo. I'm not entirely sure how Sweden says it. I want to always like put the V in there. I think that's how you say it, right? But anyway, he's 46 years old, 183 centimeters. I think that's approximately maybe about, I would say, 6 footballs like put together. Sorry, I'm American. We refuse to measure it. Like we barely use our own imperial system. But anyway, he's a light novice, and he was asking a couple questions as far as one of my strength focused power building programs, in which on 1 week you're benching twice a week. On the second week you're benching 1 time a week. Now it is a novice program. Novice training, in my opinion, should have a little bit of more variety in it, not for the purpose that it's going to benefit them more, but more so that it's just going to kind of teach them a little bit more about their training, what they like, what they benefit from. And it's also to kind of illustrate a point that you don't need to bank on super high frequencies to get better at something. Yes, there is an argument to be made that, if you want to really improve something, you need to increase the frequency of it. However, that method, in my opinion, as you continue to get stronger, that doesn't really pay out too well. When you're squatting like under like 300 pounds, maybe like low threes, squatting 2 times a week, it's very doable. But once you start getting over that threshold, maybe it's kind of time to back off a little bit. But that's something where, and this is where it's kind of like maybe you need to test it out. But at the same time, if you were to just start squatting 1 time a week only, but you're very consistent, you're very progression minded, and you're not like going to failure all the time, but you are pushing close to it, and you're intelligently finding ways to move forward week to week, even though you're only training that movement 1 time per week, you're still going to make a lot of great gains. So another reason why I alternate between 2 times per week frequency and 1 time per week frequency is because when it comes to strength training, I find that strength training, when you're a novice, obviously it builds muscle. But the more advanced you become, strength training does a great job at maintaining muscle size. So when it comes to, novices trying to, for whatever reason, optimize literally everything when they don't really have the biggest information pool about themselves or training just yet because they're new to it, and that being the case, I just like to kind of get them into the thought process of, if I'm going to put something kind of like on the back burner, just try to get it stronger, try to train with heavier loads, because that's what's going to keep that quality mass. So that way you can kind of feel comforted knowing, all right, even though I'm dropping down the frequency because I'm training it heavy, my muscles they're not going to like wash away. They wouldn't anyway, even if you, like let's said, like 1 week you bench press and the next week you don't. Your neural pathways might get messed up. Your technique might suffer because you're not getting regular practice. But your muscles themselves, they're not like washing away or anything like that, right? But let's get into it. So he started the TSA, the Strength Athlete 9-week beginner program, which is a program that I will be reviewing pretty much right after this video. And that video will be posted on Tuesday. So let's go over this program. When it comes to the bench press, he has bench press 4 sets of 6 to 8. So one thing that I would wonder here, right? When it comes down to, let's say, the progression or something of that nature, when it's this short of a range, I kind of have to think about like, okay, am I going based off RPE? Am I going based or RPE and by extension RIR, which I think is inappropriate for a novice, quite honestly? Am I doing straight sets and each week it's just a different number of reps per week? So let's say you do 4 sets of 6 on week 1, 4 sets of 7 week 2, 4 sets of 8 week 3, and then you add weight. So add weight and go back to 4 sets of 6. The thing is, you need to make sure that there is a clear progression with your program. Now, what that progression is, in my opinion, is not the most important thing, as long as it works. That's probably the main caveat. As if it works, it works. Like, oftentimes we like to think that if it works, but for whatever reason our favorite YouTuber doesn't say or make a video about it, but it's working, we like to think that maybe I'm doing something wrong, maybe I'm getting lucky. But no, you need to be able to trust the data that you're accumulating for yourself, right? So when it comes down to shorter ranges like this, you really have to kind of understand, like, am I doing so because I'm going based off RPE or RIR or straight sets? Now, when it comes to the actual volume for the bench press, I think this is great. When it comes down to, like, let's say a strength training threshold for the bench press, one thing I'm going to make a video about is if you want to get a really strong bench like a bodybuilder. Meaning, like, what is, like, for the regular gym bros, like, what is their favorite movement? Bench press. Some of them don't believe in deadlifting because they think it's gonna hurt their back. Some of them don't like squatting because they don't like to train legs. But what do all gym bros, like commercial gym bodybuilders, really know how to do and are really good at? Bench pressing. When I got into strength training and stuff like that, one thing I noticed was that my bench was actually getting really weak in comparison to my squat and my deadlift, and I hated it. And I was wondering, like, why the fuck are these guys who, like, they're just going in like rah, like not really thinking about their training, making so much better progress than me? And that's kind of like, I feel like something very telling about a lot of novices, because they think that if they learn more, they're going to progress faster, when in reality it's just whatever you have learned right now, you haven't really applied it to the best of your own ability just yet. And this is just a possibility, it's not a fact. But that's kind of what went in my case. So what I decided was, okay, I'm not going to let a bodybuilder outbench me. I'm not going to let a bodybuilder be stronger than me. But the thing is, why is the bodybuilder stronger than me, especially when it comes to this movement? It's because they train it a different way. So I do really think that when it comes to strength training, you do want to stick to like slightly lower thresholds. I think for the bench, 5 to 10 is great for most of your training. You can dip below that and in under certain circumstances, but in most cases, I do think it does benefit from slightly higher reps in comparison to your squats and your deads. So 4 to 6 or 6 to 8 reps is a good range. It's a bit small. I would widen that out to 4 to 8, just because if you were to train, like, take each set closer to failure, the likelihood of each set dropping off is going to increase. And if you kind of have a range that is so small, you might get thrown off when, let's say, you do 8 8 5, and then you're thinking to yourself, damn it, now I need to lighten the weight, hit 4 sets of 8 again, and then go back up. I don't really think that's the smartest move, quite honestly. I do think that having regular exposure to a weight that does challenge you is better, done intelligently, of course, but that's just something to take into consideration here. And then next we have the row. So I'm going to assume it's the barbell row, and if that's the case, right? So let's say it's the barbell row. So if it's barbell row, and then you're doing the barbell row here, and then you're deadlifting the next day, I don't like that. When it comes down to the barbell row, I would either have it on the same day as the conventional deadlift or on the day after. Those are kind of the two ways that I like to put the barbell row in. It just has to be after the deadlift. You don't want to enter the deadlift where you're going to be loading your posterior chain and your lower back the most when you're already fatigued, for a couple reasons. One, increased likelihood of injury, and also your ability to push more weight, push progression is going to be hampered by the fact that you're entering that movement fatigued. So if it's a barbell row, not the biggest fan. Dumbbell row, you can get away with it. It's more okay, but it's very okay. It's not good, it's just very okay, because you can still run into the same problems. It's just to a lesser degree than the barbell version. Now let's say it's the cable row. So if it's the cable row, this is where it becomes like more acceptable, in my opinion, to have it be the cable row. But best option here for most people, like cable row, I think is like if your back can handle it and you're not going to notice any adverse effects, then yeah, do the cable row. But if you do kind of want to have that extra security blanket or whatever you need to kind of feel comfortable, do a chest supported row. Chest supported rowing is great. It will build your back. It will carry over to all of your back movements. As long as you're rowing, as long as you're doing your back training, who cares what it is? Just get it in there, right? And that's what she said. And at least this way, your lower back is not going to be totally messed up. 4 to 8, like I said, this is a kind of a small range. Nothing wrong with that, but then usually that just means that you're probably more than likely training with RPE and RIR. But like I said, how are you going to... The main reason why I don't really like using RPEs and RIR is because how do you apply progression reliably, I would say. You can apply progression to it. There are ways to go about it, but the thing is to reliably push progression on it. I do think that's where a weakness that it does have. I'm not saying that it's completely ineffective or useless or anything of that nature. It's just something that I personally would rather not have to deal with or contend with. Sometimes it is just a case of like shutting up and nutting up and just, that's what he said, and just going into it, right? And that's what she said. Just kidding. Sorry, I've been on Office binge again. I'm like, this is like my 8th time watching it, maybe more than that. But anyway, let's get into the next one. Overhead seated barbell press. So 4 sets of 6 to 10, great range there too. One thing that I like to do, let's say, like since the bench press is the main movement here, I do kind of like to do the barbell overhead press as a lighter as like either a lighter variation or just with lighter loads. So it might be that you're doing the 6 to 10 reps, but you want to be using a weight where you can do 8 to 15 reps, if that makes sense. Like you just want it to be kind of light. Like you're still gonna build muscle. It's just not gonna be like, let's say, as optimal, but because you're trying to balance your recovery on a couple other things, I would kind of go with that route, right? Now, when it comes down to the volume and the number of sets you're doing, a couple things that will kind of like determine whether or not like it's worth it, and that is rest times. How long are you resting between these? Are you doing 3 minutes of rest here, 3 minutes of rest here, and 3 minutes of rest here? If that's the case, this can take you quite a while. I would prefer to keep rest times closer to 2 minutes, just to get more density in your workouts. And also, me personally, I bias toward lower volumes first. Part of the reason for that is because where do you go from there? I do think that there's like a discussion to be had about like, we kind of get caught up into this high volume craze because like, we can skew the literature and the data to show that high volumes are better because, depending on how you measure things, right? But what I'm trying to say is if you start with a lower to moderate amount of volume, your ability to manipulate that over time is actually going to be beneficial. Whereas if you kind of go from the opposite direction, you start out with too much and try to fall to your happy medium, you're gonna regress a little bit because you're gonna overshoot, you're gonna overcompensate, you're not going to adapt properly, you're gonna overtrain, and then, that's just kind of a waste in my opinion. It's much better to start small, start light, start with less, and build up to more rather than start with as much as possible and trying to chisel away because, it's just much easier to measure coming from this end of the spectrum where you're starting with less rather than this end of the spectrum where you're starting with more. All right, so let's see. At this point, you already have 12 sets into the workout. Pull-ups, 3 sets per max. One thing I would say is if it was convenient for my gym setup and the variations that I'm doing, you're doing 4 sets of rowing and 4 sets of benching. Just superset them. You're doing overhead press for 4 sets of 6 to 10 and pull-ups. Just superset them. Like this workout could be cut much shorter, and in my opinion would be a lot more effective. Not more effective, but just like more efficient. Because like for the amount of gains you're going to receive from it, you're not really going to get in the way of that by including these supersets. So 4 sets of bench and row, 4 sets of overhead press and pull-ups, and then you can go into this right here where you're doing maybe 3 to 4 sets of skull crushers, easy bar curls, and rear delts. You can bring that down to 2 to 3 sets because depending on like how much you want arms, and if you really push these to failure, which I think you should do because they're smaller movements, 2 sets is fine. You can definitely get away with lower volumes if you're pushing like to failure, like true honest to God failure. But this program is very close to what I personally would do. This is my main work. This would be like my supplementary work, and then these are my accessories. That's how I structure my workouts. This kind of falls under like accessories as well, but it does benefit everything else. Having a strong back will always be a benefit. Let's go into lower. And this is another sign that this is a program that almost looks like something that I wrote. And reason being is because deadlift. 3 sets, or not because of deadlift, but because look at the number of exercises on the upper day versus the number of exercises on the lower day. So a couple of things that I like to do with the lower day that kind of like separate my lower days from most other days is the fact that I do include back and biceps. So that's kind of like where I put a lot of back and bicep work, especially if I'm trying to do a bicep prioritization phase. I'll have bicep work here, but I'll have even more here. So that's something that I do to kind of like make sure that each day is kind of like the same, because me personally, like I try to like have my workout to be an hour to an hour and a half. And if I just do this is gonna take me like maybe 45 minutes. So the rest of the time I can fill in with back and bicep work. So here we have deadlift, 3 sets of 3+. So usually that means you're gonna do 1 set of 3, the second set for 3, and then the last set try to go for an AMRAP. That can work. I would just say like, what is the number that you're going to use to justify an increase in weight? With this, I would probably do like a 6. So if you can do a set of 6 for your last set, 6 or more, the next week go up in weight. That's kind of how I would go about it. Personally, here for the high bar squat, 4 sets of 5. Nothing wrong with that, but usually this kind of means that you're, like I said, there needs to be some type of form of progression, right? If it's going to be straight sets across, usually that just means once you do 4 sets of 5 with one weight, you're going to go next week, add 5 pounds, and try to repeat that. Nothing wrong with that. That's very standard training. That's like the most basic training practice ever. That's one way of going about it. But you can also use a similar method that you use for your deadlifts. On the last set, go for as many reps as possible. And then once there's a certain rep threshold that lets you know it's time to add weight, you can do that. That's why evolving rep ranges or rep ranges in general are so useful. Another thing that you can do is like if you do want to use straight sets, I've seen this work with great effectiveness is 4 sets of 6, 4 sets of 5, 4 sets of 4. Then you deload, go back up. So that's one option. Then leg press, 3 sets of 10. So this is great for quad work. One thing I will add here though is you want to do is like either hamstring or lower back work to kind of balance it out, because you have 2 quad exercises here and you're only having 1 movement for your posterior chain. So, you know, do some hamstring and lower back work. You can even do hamstring and /or lower back work. Then lateral raises. So you're already doing some type of arm work here. So since you do, let's say you're doing dumbbell laterals, just add dumbbell curls. You don't need to add like tricep extensions because you're going to do an upper day either the next day, which I don't recommend, or like after a rest day or something, right? Now let's look at the upper day 2. So it looks to be the same exact workout, just with a couple differences. This should be, in my opinion, either a variation or there should be more variation in load. So here you have 4 sets of 6 to 8. So me personally, I would go 4 sets of 10, like either 8 to 12, you know, like kind of like that's a good one where 8's the minimum, or even beyond that, like 10 to 15. Like that kind of works too. I do think that high volume benching is very beneficial. I have found that whenever I spend a lot of time doing reps with the bench especially, it just kind of takes care of everything else, size, strength, and everything like that. If I do that with, let's say, deadlifts, I just burn out and fatigue too much. If I do that with squats, I just hate my life too much and I want to like just stay away from the gym. So it's kind of like a manipulation of consistency rather than it is optimization of my program, right? But I will kind of go into a higher threshold here, and you can even do it with a variation, whether that be like, let's say a close grip bench, wide grip bench, incline. If you are a novice, I do think that it's more appropriate to have variations be separated by days. So in my own programming, I do, let's say the flat barbell bench press, and then right after a variation. If you're a novice, I actually would prefer you do barbell one day and then another variation another day, and kind of alternate between those two. Then rows, like I said, is this barbell? Is this dumbbell? Is this seated cable? Is it chest supported? That's really important to know. In my opinion, there's not really that big of a difference if you're going to be doing, like, let's say 4 sets of 8 to 10 versus just 4 sets of 10 here. This is why I'm thinking that this program is a bit RPE based, because let's say this is 4 sets of 8 to 10 with 1 to 2 reps in reserve. This is probably 4 sets of 10 with maybe 3 or 4 reps in reserve, because that just that was what would make sense for me. And same thing here. Like honestly, like I don't think that there's any benefit to not doing the same number of sets for pull-ups and a vertical push, just because usually if you're doing vertical pushing, you're going to be in a rack that can facilitate pull-ups. Usually, I know that that's not always the case, but if that is the case, just do pull-ups there too right after. You're not going to lose strength. You're actually, in my opinion, going to look better and be stronger as a result, because you're balancing out the volume of pulling and pushing. And dumbbell overhead press, so it's a small range, but you know, not the biggest. It's not the end of the world. And triceps, 3 sets of 12, and then I would just like superset rear delts into that as well. Then let's have the last lower day. Squat, 3 sets of 5 plus, so it's another plus set. And then here we have deadlift, 3 sets of 3, and going into a plus set again. Deadlifting 2 times a week is doable, but I think it's more appropriate to kind of think of it as you're deadlifting 1.5 times per week, and here's why. You are going to do something like a block pull on this day. So this would be something like a block pull. So like a block pull, like an elevated surface, something like that. Maybe a rack pull, doesn't really matter. I think 90% is too close, in my opinion, for whatever you used here. Because like, you know, as you get stronger, the more it scales, and it's still gonna be heavy load even if you take off 10%. I would take off 20%. I would probably take off more if I had more control over. So, you know, 60 to 80%, and then maybe like increase the number of sets, like so maybe 3 to 6 sets of 3, and then I would remove the AMRAP set. I think here, if you're going to be deadlifting twice a week, either it should be a variation like a Romanian deadlift where you can do a lot more volume, or maybe even a stiff-legged deadlift, but even then I'm kind of averse to pulling off the floor more than twice a week. So I would actually prefer a Romanian or like a block pull or rack pull, and kind of go from here, right? Then another thing that I would recommend doing is adding shrugs. And for the purposes of keeping, in my opinion, I do think that training flow is important. I would kind of ask that you would do good mornings right after your squat, because you're probably doing good mornings with the barbell. There's a reason why I do barbell rows after my deadlift. As I'm stripping off plates, would you look at that, my barbell is now loaded with the weights that I use for my barbell rows. Might as well do some barbell rows. Same thing applies for the squat. Would you look at that, after taking off a couple plates, this is my weight that I use for good mornings. Let me do some good mornings. So I really do recommend that there. And then I'm not the biggest fan of pulling off the floor twice a week. So if you do pull off the floor more than twice a week, it's kind of like one day is for progression. The other days are for technique work, speed work, maybe some volume threshold work. But generally speaking, when it comes to the deadlift especially, I don't think it's necessary to do super high frequency with it. Then shrugs, just build up the musculature of the deadlift, and you're going to get a bigger deadlift, quite honestly. Do your rows, do your shrugs, do your pull-ups. It's all going to help. Then lunges and lateral raises. Yeah, just add some biceps here, because, you know, who doesn't want bigger biceps? So overall, this program is really good. Now, when it comes to volume, I think it's still very appropriate. This is a fairly low volume program. Like, there's nothing, like, you know, generally speaking, when it comes to most programs, like if I see like sets of 5 and 6, I'm just like, okay, let me see where it's coming from. Let me see where everything else is kind of going, because me personally, I don't really benefit from super high volumes, or at least when it comes to sets. But if that is the case for you, you can definitely add that in as you build up over time. So there we go. But yeah, overall, this is a great program. I think that it'll work very, very well. So congratulations on, or well, not congratulations, I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, good program. Just be sure you have a clear path of progression. That's going to be super important. Just make sure you know, how are you going to progress. Are you going to progress based off a like backloading, so that last set of the day? Maybe top loading, where you're going from the first set of the day. You know, if you hit like 20 reps on your first set, then the next week you're going to add weight. You know, that's options there. Steve Shaw has a great video talking about his favorite progression methods. All of them work. I've used many of them for different variations, so all of them work. There's other variations of progression that I've gotten from like other sources that I really like, so Alpha Destiny being another one. All that really matters is finding what worked for someone else, someone you trust, and maybe even having a bigger sample size. So let's say they are a coach and they implement this on their clients and they know that it works. Give it a try for yourself and see if you like it. A lot of things work, but there's only going to be so much of things that you actually like. So if you find something that you like, try to create a program that actually lets you train in that way. Like, there's no need to unnecessarily or arbitrarily decide that your program is only useful if it is something that your favorite YouTuber has said, you know, or your favorite researcher has said. If it works, keep doing it. That's going to be the key for a lot of these workout programs. Obviously, like, there's some things that I think could be done better, whether that be from a time standpoint or also just from a, like, the flow of the workout, so that way you're entering each movement in the best position possible. Because another reason why I would do good mornings over, like, let's say, and then block pulls after, is because the good morning is going to be your hinge movement. It's like a good morning, it should look like a conventional deadlift, but the bar is out high on your back. So because of that, your low back is fatigued, so then let's do an upper back movement, block pulls and shrugs, or rack pulls and shrugs. That's kind of like decision that I would make there. Also, like, volume allocation. I do think that there's a benefit to keeping your pulls and push volume at least equal, if not more, because, like, part of the reason why I do back so frequently is because, let's say I'm doing like 10 sets of pushing here, even if I'm only doing 5 sets or 6 sets of pulling on the upper day, I'm making up for the rest of it on the lower day because I'm doing more back work there too. There's a lot of different ways to train the back. I just recommend that you train it very, very frequently. So that's kind of like what these programs are for. But anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like me to review your videos, either copy and paste them in the comments below, send me a message, buy coaching, buy merch, support the channel. I really do appreciate all of your support and all of you for subscribing. Thank you so much again. Have a great day.